The time lock. Once the Syrians got the idea to create a slave race who was not allowed to reach the stars, to keep them trapped they also had to create something which can be most easily described as a time lock. The human race who was already here, the Namliu, was multidimensional and could travel interdimensionally between the stars. This, of course, had to stop if your purpose was to enslave a race. Therefore, the Dark Lords reconstructed the natural grids around the planet to create this artificial time lock, which would keep their slave race from experiencing simultaneous time. They had to have them adjust to a straight, linear timeline. However, this is not easily done, because we live in a multiverse where our thoughts and actions create new realities, and thus new timelines continuously, but the trick was to, in addition to create this artificial grid, make the slave race oblivious to whom they were and where they came from, plus the whole conception of time, timelines, and reality in general. This way, these master manipulators could manipulate people's thoughts and create their realities for them in a manner which was more in line with what the Syrians wanted us to believe in order to control us and our destiny. In addition, and in line with the above, the Syrians had to rearrange the DNA of the prototypes they were creating so that when a spirit entered the body, it was locked into the grid, both in a more lofty fashion but also through their manipulated bodies. Thus, the Dark Lords thought they had constructed the perfect trap. However, the grid, the artificial grid, here spelled with a capital G, was not at all perfect. It was meant to also block certain frequencies of light and prevent it from reaching the surface of the planet. Light carries information. This was done in order to keep humankind uninformed. But the grid was like a Swiss cheese, and pillars of light could penetrate, coming in from the sun and the cosmos in general, and now from the galactic center, as we are aligning. This didn't bother the Syrians too much, because even when the light was able to penetrate, the DNA was rearranged in such a way that the information went right through the human bodies without being absorbed, because there was no one there who knew how to receive it. But there was something else with the imperfect grid that the Syrian overlords were very concerned about. The grid could be used as an escape route after the person died. The Dark Lords did not want that to happen. They had invested a lot in this control system, so they wanted the same souls to incarnate over and over, just to be recycled into a new slave body here on Earth. Therefore, they invested a lot of time in figuring out how to prevent souls from escaping after death. The solution to the problem was a tunnel of light. When a human soul left her dead body, she was normally confused, because she had been kept ignorant and didn't know what to do and where to go. So, some souls stayed discarnate, hovering over Earth, while others attached themselves to another human body, unquiet dead. See Metaphysics paper number 3, and some escaped through the pillars of light, the holes in the Swiss cheese. None of this was what the Syrians wanted. So they created this tunnel of light, which was often connected with a warm, fuzzy feeling, and false images of dead relatives leading them towards the tunnel. More often than not there were also spirit guides there to greet them and meet them after they separated from their bodies, and sometimes it could also be a religious experience, with a Jesus figure waiting on the other end, or some other religious deity before Jesus' time. The whole purpose was to direct the deceased away from the holes in the grid and manipulate them into the trap. Once the spirit had agreed to enter the tunnel, they were sucked in with an enormous speed, almost like a cosmic vacuum cleaner, and entered the between life area, where they met with their dead relatives and friends, or fragments of their souls, left in the afterlife to keep the new, ignorant spirit busy. The blah was in fact just a relay station where the spirit was waiting for her next turn to be recycled. Here in the afterlife, the spirit could relax with friends for a while and experience some extraordinary things she could do with her avatar/light body, One of these things was she could manifest a whole reality for herself. She could create a house out of the blue, a horse to ride on, almost whatever she wished to do. After a while, however, it was time to be recycled again. The Syrians and their helpers, residing in this dimension, and whose job it was to manage these in-between spirits, had to block the memories of their victims before they were shot back into a body. So the souls who were about to be recycled received some heavy-duty implants before they were ready for their next lives. They were put in a chair and were spun around, while bombarded with images in a rapid speed, telling them to obey their masters, and to forget about previous lives. Some of these implant stations were located on Mars, others in the Pyrenees 1314. From there, the soul was then shot into a new body with all memories erased, and so it went on, life after life, up to this very day. Very little has changed. The only thing that apparently has changed over time is that some souls who have been heavily implanted over time, appear not to need the amnesia treatment anymore, and will automatically take a new body when one becomes available. They don't even have to go through the tunnel of light at all. So, one way to escape would be to disappear out through one of the holes in the grid, explore the universe from a soul level. You automatically become multi-D and inter-D once you have penetrated the grid and escaped, and join a civilization, or the beings on a planet you feel you would be happy residing on. This, of course, is a secret no one will tell you about, not even the best of the channeled entities, because they all want us to stay here and work it out from our Earth perspective. Those channeled entities, including the Pleiadians, have much invested in us and the living library, and want us to defeat the Syrian overlords from our 3D perspective by upgrading our DNA, raising our consciousness, and build a new Earth. Why do they want this? Because if we do, it will also change their future, which is where they come from, and hopefully stop their own tyranny under which they live. This pertain in particular to the Pleiadians, who could trace back the tyranny they lived under to decisions we made during the nanosecond, between 1987 to 2012, which has affected their own timeline negatively. Therefore, they tell us, they are here to help us make more ethical and pro-survival decisions and thus change our own future timeline, which will affect theirs. So, in other words, they are here to work out their own karma, which has to do with their own interference with humans and the Earth in their past, which would be our present and our past. For this to work, it requires that we stay here in our 3D bodies, raise our consciousness, and become multidimensional without technology, or with minimal technology, and that we claim our sovereignty as human beings. If this succeeds, the Syrians would have to leave, or play out their own karma in another version of Earth, where those who refuse to wake up will potentially spend the rest of their future together with their slave masters. They can of course anytime change their course, but it will be harder and harder the longer people wait. The nanosecond was a time window when the galactic center has been bombarding us with information carried on gamma rays and other frequencies of the higher electromagnetic spectrum, and we have had a chance in a million to upgrade ourselves. Still, be aware that there is a choice. We do have opportunities to leave this planet and go somewhere else, particularly when we experience body death, but we also have the option to stay here with our fellow humans and ride things out, remain system busters and help raising the energies and regain the rights to this planet's. These are the same rights we, in conjunction with the original founders, once had, and as a result flesh the Syrians out, or have them integrate with our higher vibrations and forgive. If everybody who knows how to do it chooses to escape, the rest of humanity, who has been more heavily implanted and are not yet able to see the new dawn, will be doomed. No one will judge us if we escape, but it takes more courage, love, and caring to stay and ride it out, especially as I believe we can do it. More about that later. And remember, once we've raised our consciousness, we don't need to go through the tunnel towards the light anymore. We can come back with memories intact, no amnesia implants, and continue our work, and mind you, we can, if things get ugly, escape at any time. But again, those who want to leave are absolutely free to do so. We don't have a contract to stay here. When the God spell is broken, it's by choice. There is no need to go into the tunnel of light. When you read this, you are at that point. The key to freedom is disobedience towards those who keep us in chains. Remember, they need to have our permission to enslave us, whether it's a conscious decision or not. Of course, we have to be smart about it and not just go and sit in the forest and think we're disobeying the Syrians. It's a process, and can only be done if we choose to stay for some lifetimes yet. There are more things to be aware of as well, but we shall go into that later, in an upcoming paper. Also, when I say we must forgive those who suppress us, it must stir up some controversy. Why forgive those who have murdered and slaughtered? Well, we must forgive those who decide to repent, because this also means we forgive ourselves. We are all in this together, and to leave a long era of tumult and chaos while still holding grudges against somebody is not going to make us happy. By this I don't mean we should turn a blind eye to what they are doing in present time, quite the opposite. We help where our help is asked for and needed, but spend most of our time developing ourselves to be able to inspire and lift others up so we can reach for the stars together. Everybody has their own local universe inside of them, and we all create our own reality in conjunction with others who work in our realm of frequency. The Syrians who decide to proceed with these inhumane processes also create their own living hell and in the long run will eradicate themselves, something we will go into mechanics about as well in a later paper. Each being needs to work out their own inner conflicts, that's just how it works, and needs to be understood by the evolving human. Don't interfere too much with others' unhandled conflicts and grudge games, it will lead you nowhere beside towards eradication of self literally. Forgive where you can and move on. In the meantime, help those who need a push in the right direction, but don't interfere with their learning lessons. Like a certain native Indian said, a true warrior knows when to walk away. The Pleiadians lecture the following: because of the time locks that were put upon the portals here, and because the corridors of time are owned, those out in the cosmos are not able to find Earth. Its light of existence was erased. A different electromagnetic spectrum, a harmless one that does not register the kind of consciousness Earth has, was put here so that Earth could not be found. Earth was covered up, quarantined. If only one road exists in and out, and it is locked, then commerce is forbidden from entering time corridor, and it is cut off completely from all other influences. 16. The bottom line here is that the Syrian overlords owned the corridors of time from the moment they locked us into 3D. Earth became invisible for visitors in general, they simply couldn't find her, she was hidden in a frequency band not commonly used, and if someone was looking in that range, Earth was still cloaked and extremely hard to find unless you knew how. They own the portals that come to the planet, and leave it. We are sitting in the middle of Peshmetan, one of the main galactic highways, and we're blocking it. And what is more, they use our energies to tighten and strengthen the grid. How? Due to that we vibrate on a locked-in frequency, and the more chaos and tumult, the tighter the grid, the less chance there is to penetrate it. Still, there are those pillars of light, which means the cloaking was never perfect, and never will be. The grid will never be repaired and made perfect. The Dark Lords couldn't do it in the past and they certainly can't do it now, because it's too late. 7 billion people are vibrating in unison towards a higher consciousness, you can almost hear the musical pitch change upwards, like when you tune a guitar to a higher note. As a musician, in my mind I can hear it literally. Going backwards in time again for a moment, things changed drastically in the whole universe back in 1945 when we opened up the gateways to the universe and made our presence known in the most destructive way. We had learned how to split the atom and used that knowledge to nuke Hiroshima and Nagasaki, watching the mushroom clouds reach the sky. Some watched it with excitement, thinking it was a wonderful revenge for the attack on Pearl Harbor. America is great. In an instant, we told the universe where we are. That's when star beings from all over the universe rushed over here across the dimensions. Most of them were extremely concerned, because here was a civilization who could split the atom but used it destructively on their own planet, their own home. And the effects of those explosions, plus all of those that came after, rippled out across the dimensions in a most destructive way. We told the universe, hey, we're here, but no one was impressed. Most were happy that we were kept in quarantine and voted for that we should remain isolated that way. 17. No one wanted to give us a ticket to the stars. 6.3 Civilizations inserted through time portals. After the destruction of the original Terra during the War of the Titans, the Syrians had to reconstruct the whole planet, which we will talk more about in the next paper. Before the genetic engineering and manipulation began, there was no grid around Earth. It was basically set up here more than 500,000 years ago to seal Earth off from the rest of the universe, while the frequency fence, which locked our ancestors into 3D, was set up about 300,000 years ago. The Syrians' own founders, the ones who worked with them, such as the Aryan called Enki, and the Syrian female known as Nin-Her-Sag, Ninki, or just Nin, recreated much of the fauna and flora from seeds they had stored since earlier, but they were not the ones who recreated the living library. About 500,000 years ago, when our planet was really coming to life again, whole civilizations were inserted on Earth via time portals, by first penetrating the grid through the pillars of light. This was not an easy task due to the artificial grid, but it was done, nonetheless. These events are quite extensively explained in Barbara Marciniak's channeled book, Earth Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library. The Pleiadians tell us that the planet at this time was owned by the Syrians, although they call them Lizzies in the book, after a devastating space war, the Titan Wars, which the Lizzies won. However, those who cared for the living library, the original founders, reinserted both the library and civilizations that existed here side by side with the Syrians. These beings could do things like this. They had whole blueprints, or templates, for civilizations that had worked well elsewhere and still did, because time is simultaneous, and often they used these blueprints and inserted them on other worlds, with small modifications and alterations to better fit with the existing environment. They transported these civilizations through the corridors of time, just to manifest them wherever they felt it was right to do so. Some of these civilizations here on Earth existed for 500 years, others for 1,000 years or more, but most of them were eventually fought off by the Syrians and disappeared. However, they did not cease to exist, because on a multidimensional level they are always existing. Sometimes, the founders inserted a new civilization on top of the old one, and archaeologists who find remnants of them today think they are totally separate from each other, although they may not be able to figure out where they came from, so suddenly there are a lot of missing links. In reality, they are just layers upon layers, and when the time portals open again, like they do now, all these civilizations will start existing simultaneously as time collapses and timelines start merging at the end of a cycle. Clues to all these civilizations can be found all around the planet today, some above ground, others underground. This will be more real to people when we break free from what exopolitical writer Neil Freer calls the God's spell, and we can look at things from other time perspectives, which are unique not only to 3D. What is a timeline, really? For a timeline to exist, it must have something like a primary event that it can be anchored to. The Pleiadians, in the same book, say that the primary event that hooked us to this timeline was the consciousness of man. 18 It is very interesting to see how much extraterrestrial influences there have been on this planet throughout her history, and it has all been hidden in plain sight to the whole population. Everyday people are coexisting amongst clues and artifacts which we take for granted as a part of our environment, when indeed these clues have incredible ancient stories to tell. Instead of exploring the real history of mankind and the ramifications of the alien influences, we have been designed and distracted in such a way that we'd rather look into things that do not matter and which will eventually dig our own graves. The question is, if we let our own ignorance be our nemesis, will there be another civilization after us which can interpret the clues of our existence, or are we the last civilization on Earth? We have a lot of important choices to make, so please, mankind, stop watching reality shows and violent sports on TV, or entertain yourselves with the newest cell phones or other high-tech devices. These are the technologies of the gods, which have brought them into their own hell. Do we really want to share their hell, letting them remain the ones holding the pitchfork? Wes Penre.